Welcome to the Exposing Scientology podcast, where we delve into what really goes on in the world of Scientology and Scientologists, and sometimes take side journeys into other organizations that display similar traits. Today, I am very happy to welcome someone that I met in 2006. She is a former producer of the BBC Panorama show. She worked extensively with John Sweeney, and we have a history together that I really wanted to discuss, and I'm so happy to have her. Please, everybody, welcome Sarah Moll.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Hi there. Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me on. That's very kind of you. I love your podcast.
Thank you so much. And it's so nice to talk to you, Sarah. It's funny, we have an interesting trajectory, a bit like John and I, where we started out as kind of mortal enemies and ended up as well, I consider good friends, and maybe it's just friends, but at least someone that I enjoy now having in my life from a completely different perspective than I did back in the old days. So, Sarah, why don't you explain how we first met?
I think we met in late 2006 when John and I had decided to and been given permission to do a program about Scientology for the Panorama program. And I think it was John's first Panorama. He'd obviously done a lot of documentaries before then. And it was my first Panorama as a producer. So we were trusted to go and do Scientology, which the BBC maybe regretted as time went on. But John and I had both done a program at the Kabbalah Centre. Well, I was the journalist on it. I didn't produce it. That was a guy called Callum McRae. But we thought that we would do something on the Church of Scientology. And I remember one executive saying, "Oh, it's all very 1980s, isn't it? It's all very Tom Cruise. I mean, it's been done. Don't do it anymore." But we thought, well, we'd kind of like to do something maybe. And I'd read an article about how the church chased journalists or dissenters or people who were maybe critical or said maybe kind of questioning things about the church and kind of went after them. So we thought we would quite like to do a program where we investigated a part of it, but then looked at how the Church of Scientology goes after people. So we decided to send an email to the church, and we were invited to St. Hill in East Grinstead, I think it was. Do you remember that?
Yes. I flew over there with Tommy Davis to conduct that meeting. I think Bob Keenan was there too, the guy who was then what was known as the L. Ron Hubbard Personal Public Relations Officer for the United Kingdom.
Goodness.
Very fancy sounding title. PR for the dead man. And I remember that our instructions, like when anything like the Panorama or Time Magazine or like big time media was involved with Scientology, David Miscavige was absolutely all over it. And he had laid out what we were to do in that initial meeting with you and John in St. Hill, actually in the Manor. It was in the Manor in one of the second floor meeting rooms, conference rooms, whatever you want to call them. I have a very distinct memory of it because we had to set up TVs or
really?
TV.
Oh yes.
For this presentation. And why don't you tell me about how it looked from your side of the equation?
It was really posh. So we went in thinking, we just went in and we thought we're probably going to be recorded. That we kind of thought that would be the case. So we were kind of on our guard. And our kind of mission is we thought maybe if we could get some access into the church, do some filming inside the church, maybe we could kind of get a little bit of understanding, because although we wanted to do a bit of investigation, we did also, it was kind of quite odd as to why the Church of Scientology, how it was still going almost, like, because it didn't seem very attractive as an organization to people. So we genuinely quite wanted to get access to talk to normal Scientologists, to go, sorry, what is this all about? It's because it was such a secretive organization.
Yep.
So our mission was trying to get some access and just kind of work out what was going on with it. And so I remember we got invited in and had a really nice lunch laid out. And I was a bit nervous about that because I thought I'm getting bored here. I don't know whether I should eat it. But it was really delicious. And then you were there. I think there was a lawyer there, a Church of Scientology lawyer, somebody else who we never saw again. Is that right?
I think Bill Walsh might have been at that meeting, as I recall.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
It does. I think he's an American.
Yes, from Washington, D.C., who sort of specialized in the Scientology human rights litigation and had done a lot of stuff in Europe and, you know, whatever. Yeah. I'd forgotten about him.
And I think I mentioned something about, we'd quite like to get access. And I remember Tommy, who'd been quite talkative, just pounced immediately and was like, you're going to do the dirty on the church, and we know it, or something ridiculous. It was it was kind of like it's a bit of a shock. And I just went, oh, right, well, not really, but, you know, whatever. And then we went back to being normal, and it was quite, and then, I mean, I'm sure you remember this, but someone put on some videos of David Miscavige. And as we sat through you said, right, you've really got to watch this video. And it's David Miscavige in some conference hall talking. It was the most boring thing I think I've ever seen. And I just thought, oh my goodness, your tactic is to bore us, to waste all our time, because you just kept putting on these videos. And you were in one of them. You were quite interesting, actually. I thought you were much better. But he was dreadful. And I just thought, oh my goodness, they're not going to chase after us. They're going to just bore us to tears. And I think you said we've got another 6 hours of these or something. John and I just went, we can't do it. We've got to go.
Yeah.
All right, well, you've got to go. Can you come back tomorrow? Because we can watch them. And I was that the tactic, to bore us to?
No, not exactly. I mean, certainly that is the end result of watching those videos, but
it was awful.
But the idea that Scientology always has is, if we can show you all of these amazing things that we are doing, then you will come from a different perspective than the perspective that you just laid out. Why is anybody even involved in this weird stuff? And Miscavige has had this idea since, like, the first time I ever had anything to do with him dealing with PR, is you've got to try and persuade them that there is a whole other story about Scientology and that it's all good. And the problem with that is that anybody with half a brain can see through those videos and go, this is just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of hype here, but not much substance. And when they go back and Google anything to see if they can find out about the volunteer ministers saving the lives of 10,000 people in Haiti, or whatever stuff they claim, or, you know, reducing the incidence of drug overdoses by 27% in Italy, or like all of these outrageous claims, you can never support any of it. So while the videos are great for convincing Scientologists that this is what's going on in the world of Scientology, anybody who has access to or an interest in anything outside of the propaganda presented by Scientology can easily verify that it's not true. So Miscavige has this idea that because this persuades Scientologists that all is well and that they should give more money, that it will also persuade journalists or people outside of Scientology. And from my experience, that just never has worked. And clearly it didn't work on you and John.
No. Well, I think it's interesting that he thought that him speaking at a conference would be kind of a dynamic video to show, or convincing. You know, if it was testimonials from people, or you could do it in a different way. But it wasn't. It was just him reading a script to like a lot of Scientologists. And it's just so dull. It didn't end as well. He just kept going. I mean, it was unreal. I just thought we're being tortured here. I didn't know it was going to be this bad. So yeah, it was. We just thought, and I thought, that's it. We're not going to have a film. They're not going to chase us. They're just going to show us these really boring videos.
How wrong you were.
We're going to have to do a proper investigation now. You know, we're going to do a bit of one, but we're going to have to fill the gaps where we're not going to get chased around. They're just going to try and bore us to tears. So, yeah, and I'll tell you what, in that meeting also, you know, you go to, like, as a journalist, you go to organisations, and there's always a bit of, even political parties, there's always a bit of kind of like, well, we might have done things a little bit wrong in the past, or there might have been some stuff that, you know, but it's all changed now, or, you know, people will be a kind of a little bit more human about their organisation. Right. And not this kind of like, no, everything we've done is great. Everything we are doing, everything we've ever done is amazing and 100% perfect. You know, that's not it. There's no reflection. There's no kind of, well, yeah, you know, we're not perfect and there's things we could do and we'd like to do more of this. It was just kind of like, it did shout, scream cult during the meeting. You just thought, oh my goodness. And David Miscavige across as such an odd man that, yeah, just kind of watching hours of him was really, quite testing. But yeah, we moved on after that, didn't we? I think we went to, we never saw that lawyer again. I don't think we ever saw Bob Keenan again. No. I was kind of quite interested in why he was an ex-firefighter or something, and he just kind of appeared. It seemed quite an American organisation, but yet there he was. I didn't really understand how he fitted into anything. Yeah, and so I think we went away and thought, right, well, we better kind of look at maybe Narconon, because there was various criticism there, and then the disconnection, which I know you covered in your previous podcast. But we were kind of looking at families in Britain who'd felt their children mainly had been disconnected from them, and that was a really heartbreaking story. That we decided that we would go to Clearwater, because I think David Miscavige was going to do a speech there, and it was once a year, I think. So we thought, well, this is probably our only opportunity. I think that's the next thing we did, the next filming we did. We thought, right, this is our only opportunity to get him, to interview him, try and interview him. We thought it's probably not going to be interviewed, is he? And so we went over to Clearwater, and there the games began.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you from my side of that equation, I had gone back from England and returned to the Hole. And for anybody that doesn't know what the Hole is, you can just look at my blog or read my book or just search the term, but it was the Scientology, basically prison camp that Miscavige had established at the international headquarters in Riverside County. And while I'm sitting in the Hole, I suddenly get notified that I'm supposed to go pack a bag and head to Clearwater immediately, because the dreaded reporters from the BBC have shown up demanding to see David Miscavige, or at least request that he have an interview, or he partake in an interview. So I got stuck on a plane and ended up in Clearwater. And the next thing you know, I'm back together again with Tommy Davis, and Miscavige is telling us, you better stop these guys. You better find out exactly what they're doing. And effectively saying, okay, the gloves are off now. You need to start going after them. And
no more videos.
I remember, like, you had already shown up at the Ruth Eckerd Hall to ask for an interview with Miscavige, because he was there to do the L. Ron Hubbard birthday event, March 13th. And by the time I got there, that was long gone, and you had basically been told by whoever, no, you're not welcome here. You can't even come onto the premises, let alone get an interview. and I can't even remember how. I think that there were already PIs that were following you, but we found out what hotel you were in. And Tommy Davis and I went and staked out the hotel, sitting in the lobby, waiting for you guys to come in from eating dinner or wherever you'd been. I have no idea. I just remember it was sometime like in the late evening when you finally arrived at the hotel, and we sort of jumped out of the woodwork with a cameraman. And at the time, I'm not in good graces, but Miscavige didn't entirely trust Tommy. So Tommy was supposed to be kind of the lead guy on dealing with you and John and Bill. And I was supposed to be like the backup who then reported to Miscavige what Tommy was doing.
Yeah.
So a lot of these interactions that occurred during this time, I wasn't sort of the I'm always in the background because Tommy was supposed to be the guy that was doing the heavy lifting. And I remember Tommy creating such a scene in the hotel that the manager came out and told us to leave.
Yeah.
What's your recollection of what happened there?
I think when we turned up in at the hotel, I'd said to Bill Brown, the cameraman, I said, well, you know, we should always have a camera with us, just in case they do go to doing what they've done before, which is chasing people who have questions for the church. So he had a kind of smaller camera with him that I used when he wasn't using it. So he would usually have a massive camera, but we always, if we were going out in the evening, we'd take this small camera too. So I just couldn't believe our luck when you were there. I thought, oh, hallelujah. This is great. I've got a great sequence. This is brilliant. And I had a Bill Brown as an excellent cameraman. He had a camera. You know, it would be awful if we didn't have that camera there. So we could capture it all. And John is very quick-witted. He's very good thinking on his feet. I think he'd had a few glasses of wine by then. But he was
I'm sure he had.
I'm sure.
I don't think anybody has ever been out to dinner with John Sweeney when he hasn't had a few glasses of wine.
No. But he can still switch it on even when he's half up.
I know.
Tommy was coming at him and he was going, "You are in our hotel at midnight. This is creepy." And it was just really good and very odd, but I just thought brilliant. This shows the Church of Scientology doing the stuff that we kind of thought they would do. And it makes kind of quite an entertaining, it's, you know, you don't have to interview people to tell you what kind of creepiness goes on. It's just happening in front of you. I did notice that he didn't speak as much then, Mike, I think. It was definitely Tommy kind of that. But I kind of, you know, you must have been very tired. How did you get on with Tommy in those kind of, because you must have been in that hotel lobby for hours. I mean, did you have to get through small talk? I mean, did you get on? Or did he know you were in the hole? Or?
Oh, yeah. He definitely knew I was in the hole. I mean, there's sort of the famous incident that I cover in my book about when Miscavige first took me out of the hole to meet with Tommy at Gold and say, the BBC have contacted us, and that was prior to going to St. Hill. And he told me that I was supposed to be Tommy's slave. And, you know, and then as soon as the meeting was over and he left, I get called to the phone. Miscavige had said, "You better make sure that Tommy doesn't mess this whole thing up." And then as soon as he had left and I was no longer with Tommy, I get a phone call from him saying, "You need to report to me on everything that he is doing." So I went from being his slave to then being the spy on Tommy for Miscavige so that he could track what Tommy was doing. I never got along. What's that?
Do you think Tommy knew that?
No, probably not. Tommy isn't the smartest guy in the room. He is very, very superficial and very, very oriented more to how he looks and what he sounds like than any deep thinker or analysis of what's going on or anything like that. So I don't think he ever really figured that out. I think that he just kind of went along thinking he was doing great. And, you know, he was the fair-haired boy of David Miscavige now, and that was a big feather in his cap, and blah, 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 blah. But I had to work with him, and I had to be with him. And when you're in the mindset of the Sea Organization, it's the us versus them world. And so it's him and me versus the BBC. So you're the bad guys, we're the good guys, and that's kind of as much as thought goes into it. But that was just the sort of the initial material for you on Scientology. Weird.
Yeah, very weird. I tell you what it did also, that time in the hotel, it made me wonder what the boundaries were for Scientology, because no other organization would behave in such a way. I mean, no other. I mean, maybe another cult, maybe, but no other organization that we would have dealt with before. They wouldn't have turned up at midnight in a hotel, in your hotel room, like tracked you down. So I just suddenly thought, okay, this is really, now I'm a little bit worried about what boundaries the Church of Scientology has, if any. And I know their whole L. Ron Hubbard, the kind of policies about being able to lie and cheat. I knew that already, but then I thought, well, what's gonna happen next? You know, are there any boundaries here? And I remember when I went to my hotel room that night, I said to John, I think you need to check inside my hotel just in case there's anything. Well, like, I don't know what they could do next. But we were kind of half joking about it. And he kind of went in and like looked behind the shower curtain and then stopped up and was fine.
That is so funny.
So we were kind of half joking, but we were also like, well, this is a little bit, you know, we're not quite sure what they're going to do next. So, yeah, and I think the next day we went to a little town near Clearwater. I don't think you were there, though. We were sad.
No, I wasn't. Plant City.
Where had you gone? Plant City, of course.
I can't remember. Plant City. It was the perfect name. It was the opening of some test center or something in Plant City. I don't remember what I was doing that day. I might have already left knowing what your plane reservations were to fly to California.
Wow.
Because if you remember, I think the next place that you went was Berkeley to see, can't remember her name.
Very nice man, the physicist, I think.
Yeah, in any event. And I knew that ahead of time. And so I think because I went to Berkeley and Tommy didn't. I followed you guys in Berkeley to do the interviews to see who you were interviewing. Tommy went straight to LA. So I think I was already en route to LA when he was over there doing his best imitation of I don't know. I don't know what he thought he was accomplishing with the tough guy routine he always sort of put on. I believe that a lot of that was what he thought would impress Miscavige.
Right.
Because it certainly wasn't impressing you guys.
Well, we were delighted, of course, again to see him, because we had our cameras on again. But you know, I was kind of reflecting on this. When we arrived there, he wasn't there. He turned up a little bit later. And when myself, John, and Bill Brown were there was a woman who was kind of running the show at the time. I think she was local to Plant City. She was an older African-American lady. She was really nice. And John said, we've been told we're not allowed to go around here. And she said, oh, well, I'll show you around. It's fine. It's just really nice. And I thought, wow, this is actually going to be, we can now find someone who seems quite normal, and we can tell us why she's interested and why she's volunteering or whatever she was doing for the Church of Scientology. And then Tommy came in and she was basically elbowed out of the way. And Tommy came in and did this really mad routine, which was great TV. But I thought, what is the Church of Scientology's objective here? Because the other woman made it sound almost kind of verging on normal, or an almost normal person talking about Scientology. But you've got this kind of Tom Cruise lookalike coming in and shouting at John that he's a bigot. I just thought, this isn't good for you. You know, what are you? This doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? It doesn't. And I just thought, if you want to put the best side of Scientology across, you probably want to go with that woman who seems quite friendly and normal, and not who's bonkers. clearly. But again, we had a great sequence, so we were kind of really happy.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Sarah. It bothered me that the approach that was being dictated to deal with you was confrontational, because I never believed that confrontational approaches accomplished anything, particularly when they're being filmed. You can have a confrontational approach with someone who you are meeting with, perhaps, or even a print journalist, as long as you're careful about the words that you use. But when you're put on camera, it becomes like, wow, this is an image that people are going to remember more the demeanor of the person than even what they say.
Yeah.
And this just kept going and going and going. Of course, then you did end up going to Los Angeles. And then in our great moment of, we're going to cooperate by giving you a bunch of celebrities to interview so that you can hear the good side of Scientology. And, Tommy and I spent 2 days briefing these people and drilling them on what they're supposed to say and how they're supposed to react and respond. And they're all like, sort of took on that same demeanor of being very confrontational and adversarial. Even someone as sort of soft as Anne Archer, who is this very gentle woman, and she ended up being very kind of in your face with John, because this is what she was told she was expected to do. What's your perspective of what happened in the great celebrity interviews section?
Well, you kind of told us that we should interview all the celebrities, and we were saying, oh, John Travolta, Tom Cruise, that's great. And you're like, no, not them. And then they said, oh, they didn't really say who they were going to be. So the first one was Kirstie Alley, or was it Anne Archer? I can't remember which. But Kirstie Alley, God rest her soul, but she was really angry. She was really angry, and she didn't make a whole lot of sense. And so we knew her as British people from Cheers. So yeah, got you, okay. But it was kind of she was a bit scary, to be honest.
Right.
And we hadn't had a lot of time, not knowing that we were going to do it, to kind of do the questions. So John kept it quite simple, kind of like, can you tell me about what you think about when people say it's a cult, and can you tell me a good thing about Scientology? They could do that bit. And then he did ask a question about the operating thetans, which they were really also angry about. But then Anne Archer came in here, and like, I just about knew who she was, and John just about knew who she was, and she was absolutely furious throughout, and it was very uncomfortable. And you were there watching, basically, I think at one point laughing because it was so bad. And John was just being harangued by this Kirstie Alley and then Anne Archer, and then the rest of the people, because we didn't get their television shows, we had no idea who the rest were. And I thought, there's about six more celebrities, but we did not know who they were. And I thought this was another ruse to take up all our time to interview people who maybe even weren't celebrities. So I was really
well, as I recall, Leah was one of them.
Yes, she was actually the nicest person. She actually came across as really quite sweet. And unfortunately, John's first question was that, I'm terribly sorry, I don't know who you are. Only because King of Queens, we'd never had it. Like, we just never had it in Britain, so we'd had no idea. But she did seem, of all of them, quite normal and nice. And she did have a crack at, trying to explain it. And I remember the operating thesis, and I think she might have been acting and just said, I just don't know what you're talking about, sorry.
Right.
But,
and I think Nancy Cartwright too, but I'm not sure about
I don't think we got her. I would have known her. Bart Simpson, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would have known her, but we didn't get her, unfortunately.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
I think we got Juliette Lewis. I just about knew who she was as well. But anyway, we thought, oh my goodness, this is awful. It's the video trick again. We're going to get all our time taken on something that's not that interesting. So I think we did a day and a half of that, and then I think you'd either run out of celebrities or we'd we'd lost the will to live, and we just thought
Lost the will to live.
I remember John going to the toilet at one point, which was quite funny, just going, "Oh my goodness!" And then Tommy's knocking on the door, going, "Are you okay in there?"
Yeah, I remember, because you guys went. That was the only place where you could speak.
Oh yeah.
Outside of
how are we gonna get out of here?
And Tommy going and banging on the door saying, "You okay in there? It's a little weird for you to all be going to the bathroom together in one small bathroom."
I know. It's because me, Bill, and John were all in one bathroom, just trying to work out what on earth we were going to do.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
dear.
you ultimately got screwed over on those interviews.
Oh, by you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I stupidly gave everyone a consent form. I gave them to Tommy, and I said, "Look, you're going to need to sign these consent forms to all the celebrities," in quotation, in inverted commas, celebrities. And I said, "You're going to have to sign them, because otherwise, it's a consent thing," which is ridiculous, because they were on camera and they'd asked to be interviewed. I mean, we hadn't asked for them.
Right.
And then so I think one of my managers, when I got back to England, said, "Oh, where are the consent forms?" And I said, "Oh, Tommy took them." And he said, "Oh, I'm just going to get the agents to sign them and then they'll send them back." And of course, he didn't send them back. And then I emailed you, Mike, and I said, "Mike, I haven't got the consent forms back. Can you give them to me?" And you said, "No."
Changed our mind.
I do not consent.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry, Sarah.
I've never used the consent form since, I tell you. And
yeah.
Our editor came in, Sandy Smith, and he said, into the edit suite, and I said, "Well, of course they've consented. I mean, we didn't ask for their interviews. They just we had to interview them, really, because I wanted to give them a fair crack." Sandy said, "Well, the problem is that we'll win if we go to court, but it will cost us hundreds and hundreds of thousands if we go to court, and we cannot use public money on that to get some celebrities in." And also, you haven't heard of most of them, but so it was just devastating. I mean, because we'd sat through a day and a half of these people, and then you were telling us, after all that, we couldn't use them.
Right.
It was really quite a very disappointing day.
I know you had some interesting times in Los Angeles. I mean, I remember when the show finally aired and I saw it, I went, "Oh my God, those stupid PIs. How did they let John Sweeney take video of them driving past the street that you were waiting? How did that guy in the hotel room at breakfast, what a dummy. What's wrong with these people? They can't even pull that off." I mean,
I thought that was the tactic, wasn't it?
Well, it's sort of funny. In some ways, it's intended to be intimidation of, we are going to know everything and everywhere you go and everybody you talk to and everything you are up to, because we've got these obvious people following you. On the other hand, having that being filmed and then ending up in the program was like, that wasn't part of the plan. It's funny. I talked to John many years later and I said, "Yeah, I followed you to Berkeley." And he said, "You did?" I said, "Oh yeah, I was sitting outside where," he said, "I had no idea." I said, "See, that's because I'm good at this, not like those other idiots that didn't know what they were doing."
We would have loved to have filmed you sitting on the next table in Berkeley. Definitely. That would have definitely made it into the show.
Of course.
That.
Yeah. But you went down to Gold and we followed you down to Gold, and Tommy and I are driving, at
we were hoping to see you in Gold, and we were really disappointed not to be honest.
Yeah. But then we get to the infamous Citizens Commission on Human Rights.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my
God. Sarah, that was another one that was intended to create a response and reaction, because Tommy had told Miscavige, "I can drive John Sweeney nuts," and he pulled it off.
Do you think that was the reaction he was expecting?
No, I don't. I think the reaction he was expecting was some form of I give up. I'm like, I've had enough of this. I can't take it anymore. This is either boring or horrible or useless, or we're wasting our time or whatever, and let's pack it in. That's what I think he was hoping to accomplish. But I don't really know. I mean, I never really asked him, well, what were you? He was just so proud of the fact that he had managed to get John to lose it and had video footage of it. But to me, that wasn't even the most significant thing about that day. It was what happened afterwards when we were all together in that little room. And John then started asking about getting an interview with Miscavige.
Yeah.
What do you recall about that? Because I've talked to John about it, and it was...
I think John just kept going. Like he, you know, as if nothing had happened. And then we'd not had a break or spoken to each other about it. And then John just started saying, well, when are we going to, because this was our big thing, like, when are we going to get an interview with David Miscavige? When are we going to get an interview? And Tom was like, well, you know, I'm not sure. And then John went back to, when are we going to get an interview with David Miscavige? And you just went, no. And then John went, why? And you said, because you're an asshole.
I remember you and Bill you were standing somewhere where you weren't directly in John's eye line, and you and Bill just sort of breaking down, cracking up with that response. And I've talked to John about it many times since. You know, it was a very humorous moment, frankly.
Yeah, it was very funny.
It sort of broke the ice because John didn't take offense at that.
No.
And all credit to him. He had just been through this outrageous experience. I mean, the thing that never was told was what went on for a half an hour or an hour before that incident of being, well, what in Scientology is called bull baiting, of basically being told, you're a fool, you don't know what you're talking about, challenging everything he said, cutting him off, like really, really, really heavily trying to antagonize him to the point of breaking. But then like you said, he just recovered and he's back like, when am I going to have an interview with David Miscavige? That's what I really want to know. And like that, honestly, what happened was John really ended up breaking Tommy, because Tommy said something in his response or reaction to Sweeney that was very, very, very bad. He said something about, I speak to him every day. And I know, because John just kept saying, well, when am I going to hear what's happening? How do I know any messages being even given to him? How do I know he even knows that we want to have this interview? And Tommy eventually sort of cracked and said, well, because I speak to him every day. Well, the story had been told to you repeatedly that David Miscavige had no idea that this BBC Panorama show was going on, and that, you know, the Pope of Scientology isn't interested in a little show on the BBC. You know, he's got more important things to do. He's a much more important person. He's a bigger name than you are, you know, all that sort of stuff. And Tommy said that, and he then realized the massive boo-boo that he had made, and the following day he took off. He blew.
Because because he was told to get out, or because he thought, oh, I really screwed up here?
Yeah, because he was now worried that he was going to end up in the hole, because that was a massive blunder. And he jumped in his BMW M6 and drove to Las Vegas and holed up in the Wynn Hotel, and nobody knew where he was. And meanwhile, you guys were going back to London that day, because you wanted to go to the premiere of Travolta's Wild Hogs movie. So I'm now dumped on a plane to go to England and had to go brief Travolta that there was a madman from the BBC.
It wasn't. You weren't too wrong.
That was probably going to show up at the premiere and start shouting at him, which is exactly what John did.
Which is exactly what he did.
It was so funny. It was like, oh, okay, well, I'm pretty prescient about this.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
I do feel a bit, I do have some regrets about that. I think we shouted at him a bit too much. But we're just saying the same thing, but we weren't sure if he could hear us. But I think we should have probably called off after 5 minutes rather than probably shouted him for about 20. Are you in a cult?
Yeah, exactly. But, you know.
And he wrote a very cross letter to the Director General of the BBC about it, which I had something to do.
I think I might have written that letter and sent it to him to sign. But then
we did get called. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, Sarah, the sort of final little incident that stands out to me is Tottenham Court Road.
Oh yeah,
because
and at that point it was just you, and we were saying, "Where's Tommy? Where's he gone? He disappeared." We were like, "Where has he gone?"
Yep. And you know, I didn't have any good answer. I think I said he had the flu. Or some excuse like that. But then John started on the thumping Pope of Scientology and David Miscavige beating people up, and I'm like all up in arms and yelling and, you know, we'll sue you and blah, 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 blah. But I've told John many times since then that was a moment that was a defining moment for me where I went, what am I doing? What am I doing defending this guy who I really owe no allegiance to other than he took over Scientology? It's not like I had joined the Sea Org with a commitment to David Miscavige. I joined the Sea Org with a commitment to L. Ron Hubbard. And now here I am on international television claiming that the guy never had laid a hand on me. And I knew that it was completely and utterly untrue, but I was just lying about it. And I kind of stopped and thought, why am I continuing to do this? What am I here for? And I credit and have credited John, and now will say to you also, it was the culmination of a lot of events in my life and a lot of things that had happened to me, but also dealing with you and John and Bill, and suddenly kind of having this realization, maybe these guys aren't all just bad. This isn't totally us versus them. These are nice people. I kind of like them, and I shouldn't, but I do. And it was only a few weeks later that I left. I just escaped. And that was a very, very defining moment for me. That silly little doorstepping in the Tottenham Court Road Test Center. And I thank you for it. I thank you guys for being there and doing that, because it made a difference and sort of helped change the course of my life.
Well, that's very gracious of you to say, considering the kind of hell we put you through, almost, you know, having you make you work hard and flying all around. I think by the time we got to the Tottenham Court Road, we'd spoken to quite a lot of people who'd left the church, Scientology, and they talked about you quite a bit, and they didn't really have any motivation for talking to us other than that they wanted to kind of help. They didn't kind of want to get involved. They didn't necessarily want to appear on camera, but they kept talking about how you've been physically assaulted by David Miscavige. And they never said that you'd assaulted anyone, or that there was never any allegation about you or you being mean to anyone even, but only about how you had been the subject of this. And I think by the stage we got to Tottenham Court Road, I think we were it's like looking back on it, I think you were, I don't know if victim is the wrong word, but I wondered what duty of care we had towards you, because you were there as a kind of, you were an assault victim, and we were pretty convinced by the many people who had told us that. And I wonder if we would have done the same now. I think it was perhaps we would have had more editorial discussions. It was kind of a bit of a mad time of what had happened before with the exploding tomato incident and the PIs and all of this going on. It was like a bit of a battle, but we genuinely kind of liked you and thought we were kind of pleased to see you in Tottenham Court Road, one, because it was good TV, but also because it was kind of nice seeing you again, weirdly. So you did seem very stressed out, and possibly more so at that point than any other part. I mean, maybe because you did have to do it all on your own in that. But yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it was, we did actually genuinely like seeing you, and it was kind of a weird thing. I think by that point, I was really, really personally cross for David Miscavige, having heard all about him. He sounded like an absolute psychopath. And I felt that a lot of people in that organisation were his victims, or just seemed abhorrent what he was doing. And to do those kind of doorsteps with you and to kind of talk about how he'd assaulted you was kind of, looking back on that now, I don't know, I think I would have thought more about the impact it would have had on you, that incident. Does that make sense? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, but don't ever regret that, Sarah, because ultimately the impact it had on me was helping me realize that I had no future there and that I did not want to continue to do what I had been doing. I don't know. You've sort of answered this, but I really had wanted to ask you. I thought about this before we started the interview. What was your impression of me and your impression of Scientology by that point, or by the time you got to putting together the show? Where was your head at? And I think you've sort of answered it, but maybe there's other things that you feel like you want to say too.
I think spending so much time with you, I think we just kind of, although, I mean, I remember this time, you possibly don't, but we were in a lift together, and it was almost like we were with no cameras at all. We were just going from one part in the Celebrity Centre, like maybe 2 floors down, to somewhere else. And it was you, me, John, probably Bill and Tommy. And we just kind of had a breather. We didn't have to start it all up again. You're a bigot, you're a cult, you're in a cult. I just kind of I think you offered me a chewing gum. It was kind of just like a moment, It was like, yeah, all right, lift doors open, here we go. So, I kind of when I first met you, I thought, God, this is just, you really are in a cult, and you're kind of not, there's nothing to get through to. But I think by the end, you clearly worked incredibly hard, because you were everywhere all the time, and you were trying your best to put a good face of it on. But by the end, I'd had a lot of problems within the BBC about it, because John losing it in such a way wasn't a great thing, and so it was kind of a little bit damaging to me. So, but all my annoyance was directed at David Miscavige, and I kind of saw, I didn't have any personal animosity at all. I thought kind of it was a bit sad that we couldn't all hang out and kind of at the end of the night and just go, at the end of each, kind of go, well, that was a bit crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, good thing is we have done since.
That's true. Hooray. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, if this is what's, I'm just was wondering about, do you think if David Miscavige hadn't been such a psychopath, such a madman, that you would still be within the church?
Highly likely. Highly likely. Because there are always these underlying motivations for what you do and why you do it. And there's always this great sense, or I always had this great sense, that I had committed to doing something, and committed to helping expand Scientology, and committed to L. Ron Hubbard, and that I had given my word, and that I needed to stick to that. And there is also this idea that gets hammered into Scientologists that if you are not a Scientologist, you are throwing away your eternity. And thirdly, family. Like, if you leave Scientology, you lose your family. And as I did, you know, my children, my wife, my mother, my brother, sister, everybody. So those things have to be counterbalanced by something. And it has to be pretty awful for the balance to tip from on the scale from I'm going to continue to do and what I've been doing and hope things get better to there's just no hope that anything is ever going to change and it's terrible and I got to get out of here for my own sanity and survival. And had it not been for the excesses of Miscavige and the threats, and it wasn't so much the physical beatings, it was ultimately the you're never coming back to the US, you're gonna, you know, you're never gonna see your family again. And at that point, I just kind of went, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. So I think, I mean, it's a question I've been asked a lot by people, Sarah, and it's a good question. And I think that that's an honest answer. As stupid as it may sound, knowing what I know now, if I look back and I put myself back into that mindset at that time, I think that that's a pretty honest answer. And I don't think it would have changed unless something else had come along that was that excessive and over the top, just made things impossible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So let me ask you now. I just want to get to the next thing. So the show aired in May of 2007, Scientology and Me, and I was really happy because it didn't mention the fact that David Miscavige had physically assaulted anyone.
Yeah.
And that was like my big, oh my God, I've got to avoid that at all costs. And it didn't happen. But of course, that didn't keep Miscavige happy. He wanted to tell me that, you know, had he been involved in dealing with this program, it never would have aired. Like, he had every opportunity to do so and refused. And then once it comes out, it's like, well, if I'd been doing it, it would have been all good. But I left and I ended up selling cars in Williamsburg, Virginia, selling at the Toyota dealership there. And suddenly one day in late summer 2007, I get called to reception and say, there's someone here to see you. And there is Sarah. Like the last person in the world that I expected to see, you showed up. And tell me about that from your side of this equation.
Well, John got an email from someone who he'd contacted that from one of the members of the team, and they just said that you were selling cars. You'd left the church and you were selling cars, but that you still had a Miscavige connection, not with David Miscavige, but with someone from the family, and you were now selling cars in Virginia. And I just thought, that sounds mad. That's not true. That's crazy. He's never going to have left, one. And secondly, why would he be selling cars in Virginia? That doesn't make any sense either. So Sandy Smith, still the editor of Panorama, just said, no, you should go over there and see if he'll talk to you. And I thought, well, he's not going to be there. This is a total waste of money. And because we've only heard it from one person. And the person's trustworthy, but he'd heard it from somebody else. It wasn't like, oh, I know because I saw him there.
Right.
It was just like a rumor. It was a rumor from someone. So it was decided between us that I would go, because John said, well, he might just get annoyed if I'm there. And you got on quite well with him. I mean, within the realms of the filming, and I almost got fired and all that. I mean, you know. So I said, okay, then yeah, fine, I'll go. But I'm going to go, and he's not going to be there, and it's going to be a total waste of money. But there you go. So the day before I left, John sent me an email of a goose, like as it is a wild goose chase, which I don't know if the phrase is still works over there, but basically you're going there for nothing. So I was in there, like staying in the cheapest hotel on the cheapest flight. And then I kind of went to the car dealership, totally expecting you not to be there and to go, ha ha, John, I told you, your journalism is rubbish. I've been wasted public money on this. And then they said, yeah, it's just coming. I was like, oh my goodness, what? I was mad, really. I was completely mad because you turned up, and then I thought, I'm not really sure what I can offer you here because we're going to come and do an interview. But I didn't obviously jump in with that. I just said, can we have a chat about this? Because you've left the church, and you were very kind. You gave me about 15 minutes, and you're very polite. You're as nice as ever. You're very, very, very nice to me, considering you could have just gone, get out of here. What are you doing? I've got cars to sell. But no, you did give me some time, and I didn't manage to persuade you to talk then, or to meet me, outside of the car dealership. So, but you weren't totally closed off. You weren't kind of like, that's it. Don't never contact me again.
Right. Well,
I was slightly open.
I was sort of the frame of mind that I don't want to create more problems, particularly for my mother, who was very ill. And if I went to public, that would create a lot of upset for her. But I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is quite an astonishing thing to happen, that the BBC would fly someone to the United States just to find out whether I would be willing to talk to them.
It does never happen before or since.
Right. And I was like, that sort of impressed me, and it impressed me that you had showed up. And I sort of decided, okay, well, if I ever change my mind about this, I'm going to Sarah and John first, because I feel like I really owe them something, not just because of the hell that I put you through, but because of the fact that that whole experience had been a catalyst for me getting out. And I know that a lot doesn't have anything to do with you subsequent to that, but I then did the interviews with the the St. Pete Times, Joe Childs and Tom Tobin. And Scientology sort of forced my hand on being publicly quoted by sending Bill Walsh, that same lawyer, and Monique Yingling, basically to come and threaten me. I had moved to Denver by that time. And then I eventually told the St. Pete Times, who I'd been only willing to talk to on background up until that point, that they could quote me. And as soon as that happened, I went, okay, well, if there's going to be any subsequent media coverage of me and my story, I want it to be with Panorama. And I can't remember if I sent you an email or how it happened, but I know that you came then to Denver, and Marty Rathbun and I were both there, and we talked about our willingness to participate in a second show to be done by Panorama. Well, what's your recollection of that?
Yeah, I think we had, somehow I had your number. I don't know how, but I remember talking to you maybe it was before Denver or maybe afterwards. I'm not sure, but I remember we had quite a few calls about it. But yeah, I went to see Marty first, and his partner was very nice, and then we came to Denver. I remember we went out to British style pubs twice.
Yes.
Restaurants, very nice, lovely, making me feel at home in Denver. So that was very nice. And yeah, and we just talked about what we might do. So you're very loyal and you're very kind. You didn't have to do it with us, so you're very honourable, Mike. Because you could have been snapped up by any of the American networks. They would have loved, you're so high up in the church, and to tell your story, they would have loved that. And I know subsequently they did do a lot of coverage.
Yes, although I remember that I was Brian Seymour reached out to me from Channel 7 in Australia, and he said,
Oh, yes.
I would like to do an interview with you. And I told him, look, I made a commitment to the BBC that they would be the first people that I would do a program with. And he said, well, you know, this is only going to air in Australia. I don't think there were really competition. So I remember reaching out to you and saying, would you guys be okay if I went and did this interview in Australia with this journalist, Brian Seymour? You know I committed to you, but, you know, you've got a very long lead time. He just has got like 2 weeks or something. And feeling like I had there wasn't any contract or anything. I just felt like I had an obligation to keep to my word. And so I remember either you or John answering back saying, sure, go ahead. That's totally fine. Like, not like you could have said no, actually.
No, probably not. It was very courteous of you to ask, but no. We were so delighted that you were going to do it. I don't think we would have, you know, done anything really.
Right. So, and then you were having your baby, so you didn't come to do the filming here in the US, but it's funny. No. Everything turned around in that show. Now I was being followed by the PIs, and John was jumping out of the car, like running back with Bill and the camera to ask the PIs, why are they following me home? And we're going, you know, driving around in circles and all sorts of weird things. And then we came to London, and I don't remember if I saw you when we came for that filming. In
the Tate Modern. We did a lot of filming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was there.
You were there. That's exactly right. Yeah. But, you know, we were being followed by PIs and had eggs thrown at us on the street. And it was like a real circus. But that show, the second show, the Secrets of Scientology show, where John, I don't know whether this was you or Katie or John or whoever, the Lion Sleeps at Night theme song at the beginning of that episode was like such a sort of clever touch. That episode aired, and I remember we had dinner, you and John and me and Christy, and you were very reluctant to come to the dinner to begin with. Yes. You were like, I'm not so sure if I can make it. I'm not really sure. Yeah. And I know it was because you were disappointed, because the discussion that we had when we were in Denver was, okay, Sarah, look, if we go ahead and do this show has really got to expose the truth about Miscavige. You can't like take another pot shot. You got to shoot for the king, and you got to really go after that. And you felt bad about that show is a great show. It's not like old.
I know, but like the awful thing was just that Dave Miscavige was basically serially assaulting people, and that he was putting people in a weird prison camp. And it was kind of loads of Scientologists knew about it, the high up ones. The legal department advised us that because we couldn't get any independent witnesses to that, we couldn't say it, because they were saying, well, you know, if you're a Scientologist, you've got a motivation to say that, but you must have someone independent. With them, independent people who aren't Scientologists don't get assaulted by David Miscavige, and they don't go in the hole.
Right.
So we're in an impossible situation. And I remember going to a big BBC meeting with the lawyers there, and basically with my 5-week-old baby in my arms, kind of pleading with them. Me and John just pleading, going, but it's true. They were saying, well, it may well be true, but we're not going to be saying it. And it was just awful. I think only a few weeks later, like, there was a really tiny newspaper it's called Metro. It's not that tiny, actually. It's in London. It's a free newspaper. And they put those kind of allegations in it. I was thinking, for goodness sake, you know, it's talked about widely now. And it was true then, it is true, you know, it's just, it was so disappointing. It was so disappointing, but I'm pretty sure that was the illegal argument as to why we couldn't put it in. And they didn't want to fight it or risk it. Yeah.
Well, also the BBC has always got this, well, we operate on public money, and if we put that in there, even if we're right, it's going to cost an enormous amount of money to litigate it, and we can't make that sort of a commitment. And
well, they do those things. They do take risks when they can prove it. They were just saying, well, that we're going to come up with a problem here because we can't say, because everyone who's been in it is now out of the Church of Scientology, and they're going to argue that they've got a motivation to stay. So it was really difficult. It was awful. It was awful. Yeah, it was a really, really low point. And we were so devastated, because that was the crux. That was the journalism within it. It wasn't being chased around, Who cares if you're chasing journalists? Nobody, it's like journalists can take it, it's fine. That what mattered was that this kind of awful stuff was happening to, you and others, terrible things, and we couldn't say it. It was awful.
I know, and I know how upset you were. I remember you being in tears, and I felt so bad for you. I'm like, it's okay, Sarah. It's okay, guys.
No.
It's really, it's okay.
Well, thanks to your good work, it's come out now, and it's
right.
It's known. Thankfully, so thanks to you. And
well, yeah, and then John wrote his book, and he didn't pull any punches in his book. So,
because it's true, it is.
I
true.
know. I know.
So you know more. Yeah, exactly. You know more than anyone, of course.
And he certainly didn't get sued. Okay. No. Is it, Sarah, we've taken up more than an hour already. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to say?
No, I know I'll think of like a million things after we stop the call, but yeah, no, I don't think so. No.
Well,
no.
If you think of a million things, just send them to me and maybe we'll do another one.
That would be great. Well, you know what, Mike, after all this time, I really do value your friendship, and I'm really pleased we met. And and I know you've had, just reading your book, you've had such an amazing life and such incredible challenges in terms of all your kind of adventures through that church, but also the terrible abuse that you suffered. So I'm just in awe of you, and I'm really glad and honoured to be your friend.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. I feel the same way, and so does Christy. We cherish our relationship with you, and hope to see you again, actually, sometime soon.
Great. We'd love to see you. I know how much you love England.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I'm a total Anglophile.
Oh, very good.
All right.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're very welcome, Sarah. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. You can find more episodes of Exposing Scientology wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to check out my best-selling book, A Billion Years: My Escape from a Life in the Highest Ranks of Scientology. It's available on Amazon, hardback, paperback, and an audiobook. Until next time, be well and happy.